Welcome back again. This is the second episode of why you should prepare for SHTF, for shit hitting the fan. And I want to do a shout out to JC at my work, who's been talking to me a little bit about these why reasons. Why should we do it? Well, one of the points he brought up in my office today was Prepared Mind. Have you heard about? And I get this quite a bit, not only from people I know, whether they know or not that I'm a prepper, and very few do. And people on this channel, as they say, have you heard about? And in a lot of cases, the answer is yeah. And in a lot of cases, no, tell me about it. Help me out. Why should we prepare for an emergency? Why should we prepare for shit hits the fan, an excessive rule of law, or a without the rule of law scenario? Why should we prepare for that? Well, how do we know it can happen? How do we know it's possible? Well, what we do is we look to history and we say, what has happened in history past that would indicate that an emergency on a massive scale can happen that we would benefit by preparing for? Why should we prepare? Is there history? And the answer is yes. The first example I'm going to give is natural disaster. From the Loma Prieta and Northridge earthquakes in California to Mount St. Helens in Washington, down south to Katrina, and out to the northeast there when Hurricane Sandy hit. These are more recent examples. In the past, we've had more dramatic examples like the Civil War. And in other nations, they deal with terrorism, they deal with civil war, they deal with invasions from other countries. What do we need to be looking at in the history? Well, there's natural and man-made disasters. You can't prepare ahead of time. There's not a whole lot of game plan for a natural disaster because they just happen and you only have days, if that, to prepare for. And in the event or in the case of wildfires and earthquakes, tsunamis and such, they're rather instantaneous events. There's no time to prepare at all. Other natural disasters like hurricanes and massive snowstorms, we have as little as one day and sometimes only 3 or 4 days to prepare. But there is history of them happening. History of massive devastation. Right? The tsunami that took out Japan just a few years ago was massively devastating, washed miles and miles inland, killed thousands and thousands of people, and crippled the Japanese economy with the cleanup costs. You can't prepare for those except to have food, provision, basically the bottom layer of Maslow's pyramid. Food, shelter, clothing. Preserve yourself. Okay, that's all you can do there. But that's also the only indication you get that one's coming. The other type, the man-made disaster, the man-made emergencies, the man-made shit hitting the fan that we should be preparing for, comes in the form of war, espionage, sabotage, and terrorism. So here in the United States of America, we've been insulated from that pretty well. But more and more, it's becoming a very real possibility. And you're going to say, well, why should I prepare for that? How can I trust those sources? Well, the sources that are telling us that is very possible are your state and federal government, state and federal bureaucracies, from the CDC to the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, FBI. Everybody is saying it's very possible that we can be hit by a terrorist or a rogue nation. It's very possible. And then history has also taught us that the very government that is supposed to protect its own people can turn against the people and commit acts of atrocity that are beyond imagination. The greatest among those, especially in modern history, that Americans love to reflect upon, is the National Socialist Party of Germany, the Nazis. And that's a big, big, big rock to throw in the middle of the pond and watch the waves that come out of thinking like that, even considering the possibility that your own government could do something like that. It is such an outrageous statement for me to make that that is the very reason many people who just begin to look into prepping, they just begin to look at it and they'll hear something like that. So I'm asking you, don't judge the concept, but rather look at the potential. Look at the evidence that would suggest it's possible. And after examining the evidence, then deciding if it's plausible and if you should do anything about it in either event. But if you've come this far, if someone on YouTube, a friend you know, has recommended coming to this channel and watching these videos, why should I prepare for shit hits the fan? Then they think that you've got the desire to preserve yourself and your family, that you've expressed some curiosity in the topic of preparing, and the notion that an apocalyptic or severe national or even state disaster can happen. You've been invited here. So it's been understood that you have the interest and probably the potential to understand and go forward with this. So looking at a government that can turn against its own people, like the Nazis did, is ours capable of that? Well, it's certainly capable of it. Do we have any evidence that it could be happening now? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, it could be happening now, and it likely is. So how do we know? Well, we've got history as a guide, and we've got the actions of the government itself telling us it's very, very possible. So if you're new to the idea of preparing, if you're new to the concept of the Patriot movement and other types of movements that are information-based and informative to the people, trying to get them to understand their government and the political nature of the world around them. And I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about an agenda that's preparing for something big in this nation. Okay? One of those things, thanks to my good buddy JC, shout out to you, is the potential for Facebook to rewrite its acceptance policies to allow access through a backdoor to your computer. You're going to give them permission when you start using social media and public domains to go into your computer and examine your files, presumably for the purpose of gathering information for marketing. For security reasons. They'll give you a number of reasons and then give you no choice but to accept it if you want to continue to participate in a social machine like Facebook. Now, that sounds a little bit of a vacuous statement. What do we do with that as people who like to think? What do you do with that information? Well, you have to look to history. What has Facebook done? Where did they come from? This isn't an anti-Facebook video. It's about an agenda, something that's occurring. They were ostensibly funded and started by the CIA as an information gathering operation. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that is extremely true. Now, did the Nazis do something like that? Well, they didn't have the internet, but they did go about collecting private information about private individuals in pre-World War II Germany. They wanted to know who was out there. They wanted to know what political factions and parties people belonged to. They wanted to know what their interests were. They wanted to know what type of family they were from. Were there rabble-rousers? Were they good Germans? Right? Were they Jews? Were they some other ethnic variance that was undesirable? That's what the Nazi Party did. They gathered the information with the express purpose of protecting the fatherland, Germany. What they did with the information is where we've got to think about what a problem that can be. Once the information was gathered, once it was warehoused, filed, combed through, and a corrupt regime moved into place, they used that information in a very negative fashion. Even if you're not a prepper or a history buff, you've heard of the Crystal Night, the Night of Long Knives. You've heard of the Reichstag fire. You've heard of a lot of things that happened. The rounding up of Jews, concentration camps for political dissidents as well as Jews, the expulsion of undesirable ethnic groups from German cities and the nation itself. All of this occurred. And it could only occur because the government had acquired information about the people, very private information, private and important. They did it in a different way. Today, on YouTube and other social media, you tell people about yourselves. You show them who your friends are. People get a good sense of how much money you make. All this is available through the internet now. And the government has expressed extremely high interest in the internet, controlling it, siphoning information out of it, and filing it away for future use. Ostensibly, they'll tell us that it's done for national security purposes, for anti-terrorist purposes. So why should you prepare for shit hits the fan? Because there's history in the past of governments doing it. It's not just natural disasters, even though they're very important and they're something to prepare in advance for. But governments themselves, when taken over by evil factions, waste no time in removing their political enemies, their military enemies, their social enemies. So you need to be aware. You need to be aware. You're starting to look at why should I prepare for shit hits the fan? Well, I just gave you a big reason. It's nothing you have to do in 1 week, and you don't have to spend millions of dollars to do it. You don't have to be wealthy, but you do have to prepare your mind. And then take the appropriate action. Act appropriately. Accept responsibility for yourself and your family, and start taking the actions appropriately. Take the actions that are necessary. There's lots of ways to do that, and there's a lot of channels that talk about how to get food and store food and find it inexpensively, what lasts longer, how to rotate it. Same with protection and other issues that involve preparing. But this channel is about why you need to prepare. And history is a great teacher. History gives us fantastic examples of why you should prepare. Why? I just gave you a big one. That's a big chunk of cheese to chew on. And I'd like you to think about it. If you like the video, tell your friends. If you like the video, watch some more. But above all, accept responsibility for your family, yourself, and start taking some action. That's the best we can do in this game. It's a very big and complicated game. And the best we can do, and certainly the thing we should do first and foremost, is prepare ourselves and our family for the potentiality of natural and man-made disasters. So for now, this is The Prepared Mind wishing you a good day and a good night. And there'll be more videos like this to come. I hope you watch, subscribe, tell friends, and above all else, start thinking about it. Look around at the world you live in and think about it. Prepared Mind, good night.